do tonight, where we build authentic relationships and joyfully seek the truth together. Maybe you had a chance this week to go out to the parish mission with Father Joseph Hamilton. But if not, that's why he's here tonight, to help us all out. Father Joseph is the rector of what's called the Domus, Australia and Rome, which is like, he can tell you more about that. And a priest of the Archdiocese of Sydney, Australia. Prior to his appointment in Rome, he served as the private secretary of George Cardinal Bell. Do you hear who Cardinal Bell is? You correct me. Okay. So don't take that as an insult, Father.
No. I have a very thick skin.
Father Joseph completed his doctoral studies in patristics. Patristics is the early church, the first few centuries, the early church fathers who helped understand, clarify, and hand down the faith, help us understand it. And he had studied also at the Augustinian in Rome. He entered seminary. Before he would enter seminary, he worked as an investment banker. But then he left the economy of mammon for that of salvation.
That's from my Archbishop's ordination homily.
Yeah,
that's what he said, yeah. No one gets originals. An experience I'm still recovering from. I'm still recovering from it. Just.
He enjoys reading and cooking, and he said only one person walked out of his talks this week. I said, we can do better than that.
We can, yes.
Please tell me about Father Joseph.
Okay. The technology people are trying to silence me. So, that was pretty much a fairly comprehensive introduction. We might as well just get straight into it. I teach Latin and I teach theology. I teach patristics. I'm a research fellow at the University of Oxford, Oriel College. Hit the mic again. They're trying to silence me. Pull this out again.
How about now?
Now?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Better? Technology, children, and animals, people. Don't ever work with them, okay? They're unreliable. I'm a research fellow at the University of Oxford, at Oriel College, and in patristics. And so I spend a lot of my time looking at the church in the ancient world. Only one person walked out of my retreats this week, which was quite disappointing, really. I mean, I'd hoped that there might be a mass protest, but no. And I would ordinarily, if this were somewhere else, I'd have an hour's lecture maybe, but because Instagram has fried all of your brains and your concentration spans are now reduced to 5 minutes, I decided I'll go to 30, okay? Which should be about enough for you to start bleeding from your nostrils and your ears, okay? Great. So, the word acedia comes to us through Latin, but it actually has a Greek root, Acedia, and it means lack of care, negligence, indifference. Actually means even anesthetized, absolutely just zoned out of life. It doesn't mean tired or even lazy. It's something much more chilling. It's what happens when the heart begins to treat what deserves to be loved as if it was just not worth it. The slow loss of interest from the sacred. The slow loss of interest in friendships. A quiet decision, often not conscious, almost hidden, that the good is just too demanding, too difficult, too costly. And because it begins as a lack of care, it can look deceptively ordinary. It doesn't always arrive as open rebellion. More often it arrives as a kind of a spiritual shrug. It is possible to be surrounded by good things and yet just feel dull towards them. Try living in Rome. It's possible to know what matters and yet find yourself drifting away as though pulled by gravity from friends. That weird sadness at good things, is what the Catholic tradition calls acedia and calls it dangerous. She did not learn this in a university classroom. The church learnt it in the desert. In the 4th century, a group of men and women, went into the wilderness to seek God on the east bank of the River Nile. The movement spread to Syria and Palestine. We call them the Desert Fathers, and they engaged in a life of strict asceticism, looking for the Lord. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't scandalous, it was just very persistent. And it was they that came up with the name of this, and they call it the noonday demon, the demon of the noontide. Most demons attack at night. 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, you think something is in the room, you're scared. Late at night, you feel disturbed, you feel menaced. Acedia is not like that. Acedia attacks in the middle of the day, which is what makes it so dangerous. When the sun is high, when the visibility is clear, when you should be able to see what matters. A demon that attacks by day, not by night, which makes the church regard Acedia as one of the most dangerous after Lucifer. The noonday demon whispers a familiar line in different voices, across different centuries, across the 5 continents, in different languages. And they go like this. This is pointless. You would be so much happier somewhere else. Your life is so small and pathetic. Look at Insta. Other people are living real lives, amazing lives. Back in the Egyptian desert, the monk began to find his cell unbearable. He looks out. He counts the hours. He wants to be anywhere but in the monastery. He does not necessarily want evil. He simply cannot bear the weight of the good. His vocation is just too hard. Centuries later, St. Thomas Aquinas gives it a more precise moral description. He calls Acedia an oppressive sorrow, a kind of depression about spiritual good, so heavy that the soul does not want to act, it can't be bothered to pray, getting to Mass is a pain, anything else, sports, friends, takes precedence. And Aquinas adds something crucial. Acedia, unlike many sins, is generative. It spreads, it reproduces, it gives birth to patterns that Aquinas calls the daughters, that carry the demon outwards into other aspects of the victim's life. Aquinas names them as malice, spite, faint-heartedness, despair, sluggishness toward the commandments, wandering of the mind after unlawful things. Keep those things in your head. We're going to go back to them. They're a map. Now let's bring the desert forward to your context, to Arizona in 2026. Now, of course, you will all know, I suspect, Catholics that have come to college and have just found it too difficult to keep up the practice of their faith. Or Mass is too difficult, or prayer is too difficult. They start hanging out with a different crowd, and all of a sudden, yeah, they're Catholic, but they're not so observant. So this is really probably what I'm talking about. Meet Frodo. Frodo the frat boy. Frodo did not come to college cynical. He came with plans. He wanted a meaningful college experience. He had always prayed, maybe awkwardly, but sincerely. He had imagined becoming holy in some plain and reasonable way. Not a saint in stained glass, but a faithful man with a steady heart, getting married. Heck, he even toyed with the idea of seminary. But now it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, the modern noontide hour. People cross the quad with backpacks and coffees, doors open and close. Somewhere the chapel bell is ringing, and Frodo is still in bed. Not because he partied, although he does like to party, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels that he just can't name what it is. He's just tired of something. His body has slept, but his will feels heavy. And the strangest thing is, what weighs on him is not the bad, but the good. Prayer feels heavy. Study feels heavy. Friendship feels heavy. Mass feels heavy. Socializing feels heavy. Not evil, heavy. And this is where Acedia begins. Sorrow at the good. And now, one by one, like clockwork, the daughters of the demon arrive. Daughter 1, sluggishness. The first daughter is torpor. Torpor, Aquinas calls it in Latin. Sluggishness towards the commandments. a sluggishness in regard to what God asks of us, of our basic duties. At first, it does not look dramatic. It just looks like procrastination. Frodo wakes up late and thinks, oh, I'll go to Mass tomorrow. He misses one class and thinks, I'll catch up tonight. He skips prayer and tells himself, God understands I'm tired. And of course, sometimes you truly are tired. Sometimes the body needs rest. The Christian tradition is not cruel towards the body. But Acedia is subtle. It takes the image of rest and uses it to produce avoidance. One missed moment becomes a pattern, one delay becomes a habit. Soon, Frodo is not making decisions so much as drifting. Assignments pile up, messages remain unanswered, people stop expecting him to show up, and here is what hurts. Frodo is not enjoying his freedom. He's not choosing joy. He's watching his college experience just slip away, and he feels both powerless and strangely kind of numb. Torpor says, do nothing, stay still, let it pass, and it does. Daughter 2, wandering of the mind after unlawful things. Aquinas' list includes something very specific and very modern sounding when he says that, unlawful things. But notice what Thomas says. It begins as wandering. The mind is wandering. Frodo, restless in bed, reaches for his phone. Not because he wants to sin at first, but because he wants to feel less anxious, less empty, less heavy, less left behind, less unconnected. He scrolls, he doom scrolls, he taps, he watches, he refreshes, he scrolls some more. His mind flits from one thing to another, the attention span starts to fracture, the silence becomes unbearable. And eventually in the wandering, he drifts towards things he knows he should not be consuming. Content he would not want opened in front of anyone he respects. Content he would not want written into his life story. At first he resists, he closes a tab, he tells himself not tonight. But Acedia is persistent. It works through fatigue, it works through isolation, it works through the false promise of relief. And so he returns, he lingers, clicks, 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 clicks. Afterwards, he feels worse. He feels used by the technology industry, by his own impulses, by his loneliness. He feels ashamed. He feels smaller. He feels more divided within himself. And what happens next is predictable. He doesn't run to the light. He hides. Acedia thrives in hiding. And once the hiding begins, the daughters multiply. Now comes rancor or spite. This is one of the most revealing of the daughters because it shows how Acedia turns outward. Frodo begins to feel irritated and angry at good people. A friend texts him and says, want to come to Mass? Frodo feels a flash of anger. Now, not at the friend's kindness exactly, but at what the kindness implies. That Frodo should get up, that Frodo should return, that Frodo should change. Another friend writes, hey, we missed you at practice. Frodo hears it as an accusation, even if it wasn't meant that way. He sees someone disciplined, joyful, clean-hearted. He doesn't feel inspired. He feels exposed. So he begins to interpret goodness as judgment. People are judging him. This is rancor, the heart's defensive bitterness towards those who simply by being faithful remind us all of what we are avoiding. He withdraws. He becomes sarcastic. He makes small, cutting comments. He labels devout Catholics as performative, or fake, or trying too hard, two-faced, tragic Christians, boring Catholics. Not because they are, but because their devotion bothers him. Rancor says, if I can't be good, I will resent goodness in others. And if this goes on long enough, rancor does not stay aimed at people. It begins to aim higher. So the fourth daughter enters, malice. Malice here does not mean a cartoon villain. It means something colder, darker, a developing hostility towards spiritual good, towards God. more of an Emperor Palpatine than Boba Fett. Yeah? Frodo begins to resent the very idea that God has any claim on him at all. He thinks, why does the church make everything so hard? Why can't religion just be comforting? Why are there commandments? Why is it trying to restrict my freedom? He begins to interpret church teaching not as medicine, but as oppression. And again, sometimes questions are honest, and honest questions can be holy. But malice is not honest questioning. Malice is the growing desire in the soul to push away the good because the good feels like it costs too much in terms of time, too much in terms of personal freedom. But ironically, malice is a cancer in the soul that consumes our interior freedom and enslaves us. Aquinas describes acedia as sorrow about spiritual good. Malice is what happens when that sorrow hardens into resistance. And the goodness, God, becomes the enemy. At this stage, Frodo does not feel like a rebel. He feels like a tired man protecting himself. But what he is protecting himself from is not evil. He has begun to protect himself from love, from the love of God and the love of his friends. At this point, his college experience is in crisis. From malice comes faint-heartedness, shrinkage. Aquinas and Gregory the Great call it pusillanimity, pusillanimus, anima soul, pusil, weak, weak-souledness, faint-heartedness. This is when the soul stops believing in great things. You arrive in college with dreams. I'm going to be a Supreme Court judge. I'm going to be a top-flight investment banker. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be X, Y, Z. And all of a sudden, the dreams begin to fade. And particularly, the dream of, I'm going to be a saint. This is when the soul begins to stop believing in great things. Frodo begins to think that holiness is for other people. He says quietly, almost as a conclusion, I'm not built for this. I'll never change. I don't have what it takes. Other people can be saints. I'll just try not to be terrible. This is not humility. It sounds like humility, but it's not. Humility says, I am weak, therefore I need God's grace. Pusillanimity says, I am weak, therefore God's grace cannot help me. It is the shrinking of hope. And here is the danger. Faint-heartedness often comes dressed as realism. It claims to be honest. It says, let's be practical. It says, this is just who I am. But it is a lie that destroys your future. It cuts the future off. When a person is at this point that they think there's no point in trying, the final daughter is at the door. That daughter, the darkest daughter, is despair. Not drama, not theatrics, quiet despair. Despair is not just sadness, it is a conclusion. It is the belief that good is impossible, either because God will not give it, or you cannot receive it. And it often arises after a long, hidden spiral downwards. Frodo has now layered failure on top of failure, on top of failure, on top of failure. And now the demon reveals itself. Now it reveals itself. Now it whispers to Frodo, why are you even bothering? Your life is worthless. And as St. Thomas points out, the end of Acedia is suicide. Because every demon, mauling the human form, disfiguring it, that's fun. But the goal of the demon is to destroy both body and soul in hell. And suicide is one of the darkest and clearest patterns that we've seen the demonic follow throughout the century. Acedia wants Frodo. It wants not just Frodo's body, it wants Frodo's soul. Acedia did not begin by convincing Frodo to love evil, by convincing him that the good was unbearably difficult. And when the good feels unbearable, the human person will do one of two things. Any psychologist will tell you. We will run away what saddens us, or we'll seek compensation somewhere else. Pain, splintering, and projection. Something we don't like, we can't bear, project it onto someone else. Okay? I was meant to finish an academic article this week while I was in Phoenix. I didn't do it. It's your fault. It's your fault. I mean, like, seriously. If I didn't have to be here, you know, lecturing for you, I mean, what kind of person are you? I mean, really, this is your fault. Like, at least now I feel better, okay? Now I feel better. Okay, it's your fault, okay? I was going to say the Latin Mass this morning, but I had to come and celebrate for you guys. Like, seriously. Like, really? I missed my Mass this morning at Youth 3. Like, you are awful people. Really. Okay? And I walk away and I think, oh, God, I feel so much better about myself now. Okay? Yeah. Guys, if you can master at this age the knowledge that everyone projects, recognize things like envy and pain in yourself and unpleasant emotions, and when you do project those things and try not to, you will go through life much more fulfilled and much happier. You will not project on your spouses. You will not project on your friends. Okay? Projection is damaging. It's psychological immaturity. And we have to be aware of when we're doing it, because it's also an abdication of responsibility. The Desert Fathers saw all of this in a monk who eventually abandoned the monastery. Okay? We see it now in student communities like yours. We see it in adults who abandon their commitments, their marriages, their families, their jobs. We see it in Christians who abandon the church. We even see it in religious and clergy. There is a plague of priests and religious leaving the religious life and the priesthood. Well, if you know a priest who leaves, I've got a message for you, okay? The priesthood is like the Hotel California. You can check out any time, but you can never leave. But notice, the first movement is not necessarily towards pleasure. The first movement of Acedia is towards escape. And escape, once chosen, trains the human heart to prefer feeling numb over feeling love. That's why Acedia is not just being tired. It makes the heart grow numb towards God. What breaks the spell, the curse for Frodo, is not an inspirational video. It's not a new diary. It's not a new sudden mood shift. It's a sentence spoken by a priest in a chaplaincy just like this, almost casually. Frodo wanders into the chapel one evening. He sits at the back. He feels awkward. He wants to leave. And afterwards, the priest says to him, "You seem sad around good things." And Frodo kind of jumps, because it's true. He's sad around prayer. He's sad around worship. He's sad around the idea of holiness. He's sad around people who take God seriously. Not angry, not opposed, sad. And suddenly the problem has a name. And a name gives you something you can fight. The Desert Fathers had a ruthless simplicity about fighting the noonday demon. They did not say, run away until you feel better. They did not say, wait to be motivated. What they did say was, stay. You stay in your monastic cell. You stay under the monastic rule. You stay in your commitments and your vows, and you stay in your prayer. Not because staying is easy, but because stability is how love is trained. If you cannot be stable now, you will not be stable in a marriage. You have to learn to be stable in your heart if you're going to give yourself to someone in marriage, or if you're going to give yourself to the church in some form of vocation. Stability. Frodo's cell is not a stone cell in the Egyptian desert. His cell is a dorm room, a schedule, a body, a set of relationships. But the advice is still the same. Do not negotiate with the noonday demon. You will lose. Do not let its voice drive you. Do not obey the lie that says the good is impossible or just too difficult. Stay. Thomas Aquinas helps us see why stay is not just being stubborn. Stay is relearning the supernatural virtue of charity. If acedia is sorrow about spiritual goods, then healing is not emotional excitement. The healing is charity. The healing is not novelty or finding new things to do. The healing is rediscovering the love of God again. Not all at once, not perfectly, but sincerely. So Frodo does something small and concrete. He goes to confession. He tells the truth. All the stuff on the phone, all the other stuff, okay? Not theatrically, not with excuses, just honestly. He names it all, the wandering, the hiding, the bitterness, the despair. He brings it all into the light in the confessional in front of the priest. He doesn't feel instantly pure, but he feels something he has not felt in a long time. Relief. Not relief because he has fixed himself, but because he has finally stopped living a double life. Then he makes a modest act of stability. He chooses one daily prayer he will keep, even if it feels dry. He chooses one class he will attend, even if he feels behind. He chooses one friend he will answer, even if he feels ashamed. This isn't heroism on the part of Frodo. It's the beginning of healing. And this is precisely how the Catholic tradition expects Acedia to loosen its grip, not through one dramatic leap, but through sustained, small, humble movements back towards God. So what's the point of the story of Frodo? The point of Frodo is that many, many people recognize this landscape. The afternoon heaviness, the restless, endless doom-scrolling, the quiet compromises, the post-sin shame, the bitterness towards goodness, the shrinking of hope. A lie that says you are finished, your dreams are in ruins, and it is a lie. So, if any of you recognize yourselves in this story, I want you to listen to me very carefully now. Acedia is a powerful demon, one of the chief lieutenants of Lucifer, but he is not omnipotent. The noonday demon is ancient, but set against him is the archangel Gabriel, just as ancient. Gabriel, the herald of the Most High, the archangel of hope that announces salvation. Set against Acedia is your guardian angel, and set against him is the Queen of Heaven, and all of the saints in heaven waiting to fight with you. Acedia, like all of his brethren and his master, will flee if you resist him. While Acedia says, the good is too heavy, the gospel says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When Acedia says, go somewhere else, the gospel says, abide in me. And when Acedia says, you can't change, the gospel says, behold, I make all things new. And remember, despair is not a fact, it's just a temptation. Aquinas would insist, to despair is to decide that God's mercy can't reach you. But the cross is precisely God proving in history that his mercy reaches the most horrible situations. Read an account from Livy on the founding of the Roman Empire on the brutality of crucifixion. Slow asphyxiation until your quads give out. Why do you think they break their legs? It's a horrible way to die, and the bodies are left on the cross for days for the carrion to pluck their eyes out and pluck the bodies so everyone can watch. The scandal of the cross shows that God's mercy can reach into the most horrific situations and redeem them. And his presence and power radiate out today from the tabernacle in this place, touching this entire campus. So do not let the noonday demon in. As Evagrius told his monks, stay in the cell, return to prayer, tell the truth, seek the sacraments, choose one small good thing every day, not because you feel like it, but because it is good. God is here, not accusing you, not surprised by you, waiting for you. And the first step of Acedia, out of Acedia, is not being brilliant or being a saint. It's turning back to Jesus. Turning back to Jesus is to take care of yourself, but more importantly, to allow God to take care of you. These things will defeat Acedia. They will cripple him and send him back to the dark pit with his master where he belongs. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. 30 minutes on the dot, as I've done.
Why don't we turn to the person next to us and check in, talk about what struck you.
Yeah, right. Give it.
Love to hear some follow-up questions, thoughts. Father Joseph. Ask questions about this, or if there's other things that you're curious about. When you stump Father Matt, this is the time to ask him those questions.
Right. Shy. Everything I say is funny, isn't it? I think it must be my accent, huh? It's okay. It's fine. Always after me, Lucky Charms. Oh, we finally, thank God we've got a question. Saved by your friend.
So you were mentioning a lot about the withdrawal and like just interest in like things that are good, especially when it comes to like good things or like coming to like Newman Night and like being with like fellowship, right, community. But where would you put the line between like introvertedness and the withdrawal? Because I know for me, like I'm a huge introvert, but I don't know, like where would I guess that cross where it's like it's no longer just like I want some me time, now it's like you're kind of intentionally with stuff.
Well, I think you've just answered the question.
Oh, okay.
You know, you intentionally want some you need some me time, and that's fine, I said that. But Acedia is when the pattern seems that you're isolating, you're cut off from the things that are good, it begins to affect your spiritual life. Do any of you know how a great white attacks? If you're a surfer, when you see the fin of a great white shark, on a full adult female, the fin will be about this high, okay? So if you imagine you're sitting on your board, okay, from here, the fin is bigger than you as it swims past. If you see the fin of the great white shark, you are so relieved, okay? Because the great white shark attacks on the vertical axis, okay? So you're there on your board, and it thinks you're a turtle or a seal, usually, okay? Goes dum, 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 breaches, delivers a kind of killing bite, drops you, and then circles while you bleed out, because it doesn't like the blood so much, okay, if it's going to eat you. When there are seals together, the great white will just breach in the middle to get them to scatter. Then it will pick one off on the edge that's far away from its companions. The demon is exactly the same. First he isolates, and when he's isolated, then he goes to work. Me time is fine. Me time is absolutely fine. Introverted processing is fine. But it's when you're being severed away from the flock. The wolf will always go after the sheep that is just a little bit far away from the shepherd. Yeah? He will calculate, can he get to the sheep before the shepherd can get to him? Yeah? Okay. There's a question over here somewhere.
Where have you first encountered Acedia?
Acedia is represented in kind of art very interestingly. In kind of Protestant art, Acedia is always represented by a kind of very maybe obese man sprawling on a couch, kind of falling asleep. In kind of medieval Christian art, Acedia is presented kind of quite terrifyingly, you know, with fangs and claws and wings. I think that a priest will always have temptations against his vocation, but like temptations against faith, temptations of vocation have to be denied immediately and sent to the foot of the cross. And I think that generally the temptation against vocation is usually one that comes from Acedia. Acedia and Asmodeus would be the two principal agents that I think would be attacking the priesthood. And I think every priest experiences those attacks. That's why in our divine office, the Compline, there are prayers for protection. You will not fear you will not fear the demon of the noontide, these things like that. Yeah. So I would say there. Hey.
Would you say that spontaneousness is a symptom of Acedia?
Instability and loquaciousness. Aquinas identifies as the symptom of acedia. Spontaneous, no, it's good to be spontaneous. You know, if you are rooted in the virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, and you're a spontaneous person, it's highly unlikely that spontaneity is going to place you outside the limits of the moral life. Yes? Yeah. So I don't think I would associate spontaneity with acedia.
What are things we can do for people in our lives who are in like the later stages of this like?
You could pray for them. And pray for them specifically. You know, in Holy Hour, you pray for them. If you're sure that like one of your friends is in this pattern, showing all the signs, you come in here and you ask him, you say, Lord, I ask you to deliver my friend from the spirit of acedia. Yeah. And of course, remain present. Because people tend to give up, don't they? You try a couple of times, they don't come to practice, they don't come to a party, they don't answer messages. And so if you have a feeling maybe something's going on, but it's just too much hassle to keep on chasing them. If they want to be left alone, they let them be left alone. That's probably not a good thing. And acedia and depression very often you know, psychological and demonic. The evil one uses our psychology. He has mapped it over millennia. He's watched us evolve, our brain chemistry. You nod like that. He's seen 1 million human beings do that, okay? He's just mapped everything that's going on in your head. He's a master guesser. He can't enter your mind, but he can watch you all. Watch all of your reactions, even that. You just did that, okay? Yeah, okay? Watch it all, okay? You are a case study. And then he adapts the temptation, adapts the attack. Yeah? But very often, yes, that I think that depression, mild depression, anxiety do actually can be coinciding with acedia at the same time. That is why sometimes, you know, someone goes through a deliverance, and after the deliverance, almost inevitably the person is going to need some psychological care. Because the human brain is not wired to cope, to share its space with the presence of something from the other world with an angelic intelligence. It's scarred, like it's damaging. Yeah? Or the things that opened up person up in the first place. Yeah? We understand so much more about this today than we did 300 years ago, 400 years ago, or even in the time of Evagrius. There was a question over here. I saw a hand. Hi, hello. Oh, he had it, okay. Yep, Justin.
This is tangentially related to
Okay.
and it's a question my godfather posed to me a year and a half ago when I first started this journey, and even as a catechumen nowadays, I'm still kind of unsure about it, but he posed a question about hell and everything, right?
Hell.
That before, you know, a person, rather before the death of the soul, like before the ultimate death and everything, right? That God, angels, and so on will go to someone again one last time asking.
This is in the dialogues of St. Catherine of Siena. Yeah.
Gotcha. Pretty much asking the person
To accept God, yeah, one last time, yeah. Yep.
And many times, sometimes someone will ultimately say no, right? And they go to hell, right? Once they are in hell, and even relating to the reading we did earlier today, right? What you call it, the man, we don't even know his name, we know Lazarus.
Dives.
What is his name?
Dives.
Dives.
Dives and Lazarus. Dives meaning in Latin?
Dives?
Oh, it's rich.
Rich.
Oh, good.
Dives and Lazarus. The rich man and Lazarus. Dives, yeah.
But like even in the case of Divis and everything, would it be possible at that point, once they have said no to the final asking, to still be redeemed or to...
No. No. Massive theological error. The logic goes like this. Origen made this error, okay? It was one of his big boo-boos. The kind and loving Creator loves you all so much. He couldn't bear to lose you. Okay, and so therefore, and Pope Francis modified this slightly, kind of very alarmingly, at the end of time, everyone will be rehabilitated. Or, you know, he doesn't want to see the end of, he will not permit any of his creation to be in hell. What's the next logical step on from that?
Okay. Why be good or why?
No. Any logicians, mathematicians? What's the next logical step? If God cannot bear any of his creatures to be lost,
Everybody will be there.
yeah.
Wouldn't it basically take away the concept of free will?
Then he will look at the most beautiful creature he ever created, who was Lucifer. And Lucifer will be redeemed, and the fallen angels. It's called the apocastasis, okay? The great error of origin, okay? That God will then, no. When you have fixed your will against God, just as the angels did at the beginning of time, it is too late. You have made your choice. There are no opportunities after that to come back. And you have fixed your will at the moment of death against the Lord. I told a story last night in the retreat. Just after I was ordained, I was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, visiting one of Father Daniel's and my classmate. And I just celebrated my Mass on Christmas Eve morning. I will never forget this. And I was tidying up, and an old man came into this like big, huge kind of church. And the parish priest wasn't around. And he kind of looked agitated, and he was maybe 70s, mid-70s, and he was wearing a pair of jeans and a kind of a poor flannel shirt. He was holding his cap, twisting it, and I immediately felt terribly sorry for him. And he then said to me, "Father, my brother is dying, and we need a priest." I said, "Okay, fine, I'm coming, no problem." So I went to the sacristy, I got the oils, got my ritual, and got into his truck. And as we were driving through Green Bay, he said, "Oh, Father, you know, we were both raised Catholic. My mother was Catholic, like Irish or something. But, you know, we both married outside of the church. Don't marry outside of your faith. It's a very bad idea." And, you know, it really is. I have seen so much pain and suffering. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But generally, the church has always been very prudent in suggesting that if possible, when you discern your vocation to marriage, just settle on someone who will agree with you on the most important things of your life, which are your faith. And so we drove, and we got to this kind of poorish house. And we got out, I walked towards the front door. As I walked towards the front door, I felt a weight pushed down against my chest. Okay? And the guy said to me, he said, "Oh, Father," he said, "my brother's real ill. He might be a bit difficult, but they said he's going to die this afternoon. He's at the end." And opened the door, and the guy's bed was kind of like set up in such a way that he could sit up and he could look at the front door. I mean, why you would want that, I don't know. It's set up in the sitting room. It wasn't in his bedroom, you know. But like, you know, sometimes people feel they want to be in another room. They don't want to be in the bedroom. And he went berserk. He said, "Priest, get out. I do not want you or your God. Take your church, get out." And I said, well, maybe, I said, "Don't have to anoint you." I said, "Maybe we can say a prayer." And he said, "Priest, out. I want nothing with your God. I want nothing with your church." And I am sure, as a Catholic priest, as I stand here today, I've felt it at other times, that force pushing against my chest were the demons waiting to claim him. And this poor guy, you know, was fighting back tears. He said, "Father, I'm awful sorry." I said, "You don't need to be sorry." I was so shaken. And the guy died 2 hours later. Now, maybe in the space between him seeing me, as Catherine of Siena says, there was a sufficient prayer to give him something to hold on to say yes to Jesus. But there was something in that house waiting for him. Yeah. I don't want you, and I don't want your God. If that is the sum total of your experiences on your deathbed, what can you expect to happen next? Okay. Does that answer the question? Okay, good. Okay.
You talked about how demons resort to convincing the living of suicide.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Okay. So how does a demon work? That's a stupid question. The action of the demon is divided categorically into the ordinary action of the demon and the extraordinary action of the demon. Okay, the ordinary action of the demon is your friend is here, and she's thinking, you know, wouldn't it be funny if I just slapped her and then interrupted and made everybody laugh? Okay, yeah, and that's the ordinary action of the demon. You kind of go, get out of my head, okay? The extraordinary action of the demon is when the bottle of water flows up into the air and like hits you. Yeah? Okay, so preternatural manifestations of demonic power, which are only permitted by God. Only permitted by God. The demon has no sovereignty. It's only what's permitted by God. When someone's will is sufficiently compromised by Ouija boards, seances, witchcraft, devil worship, abortion, some serious sexual sins, murder, assisting in murder, desecrations, blasphemies, in some people, it will just turn them into horrible people. But in other people, it will open a door. Okay? And something enters. And over time, it seeks to increase its control. And eventually, in a state of deep and full possession, the demon will try and drive the possessed to suicide. Yeah? So that not only can it destroy the body, but it can destroy the soul as well. Okay? Yes?
So people who commit suicide.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there is obviously legitimate psychiatric illness, legitimate sense of despair. That is an absolute real thing. But that there is also a real thing within the church that we recognize, that the action of the demon hates. What happens to the herd of swine in the gospel? The Gennesaret pigs. They go over the cliff. The minute he gives them permission to take control of something, they can't stop themselves. They have to destroy life. Yeah? The evil one is so insane. He's so insane. Even though he knows when he kills the host, he's going to be back in the wilderness again, he can't stop himself because he hates God so much. Yeah? It's an insane rage that is counterproductive. Yeah? And means that hell is always defeating itself, even when it manifests in our world. But no, absolutely, there is of course, there is psychiatric illness, and where, essentially the wiring in the brain goes wrong, and with tragic consequences. That's why most exorcists, particularly here in your country, will work with a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a team of mental health professionals. And the person will not see the exorcist until they've been through that whole kind of vetting process. And it's only when the psychiatrist says, there is something here that yeah. Do you know that psychotic people, this is an interesting question, isn't it? They never hear a voice. The voice always says, kill, 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 destroy, destroy, destroy. An retiring psychiatrist in Sydney said that to me. At the end of her career in her 70s, she had finally just stumbled on this thing, that in the vast majority of psychoses, it's not like, go and break into the church and fall asleep in front of the tabernacle. It's kill yourself, hurt someone else. And she thinks now at the end of her career that maybe in so many psychoses that the church was right. Yeah? There is something present at the same time. If I cut your arm, okay, deep, okay, and I rub, let's dirt into it, okay, like gravel, okay, it'll get infected, yeah? And then I give you an antibiotic and it'll heal a bit. When the antibiotic leaves your system, it'll get infected again. And I think that spiritual contamination can be like that with the mind. That the mind cannot heal until that gravel, whatever has gone in, is pulled out. And that's where the church and then kind of deliverance ministry happens. And particularly in the areas, the manifestations, the more spectacular manifestations in those situations would be from Asmodeus, the demon of lust and rage, rather as opposed to Acedia, But once those things are removed, then, people, their lives change. They transformation. They really actually become sort of different people, illumined, But the church has to stay very close to them. That's why, if you have friends that you think are in the group of Acedia, we have to stay close. The herd, the flock sticks together under one shepherd. We behave like the sheep. We follow where the shepherd goes. Yes? And so, sheep, the difference between a sheep and a goat, none of you grew up in the west of Ireland. Okay. Goats will not be herded. They just bugger off everywhere, okay? You're there in a field, and if there's 10 of them, they'll go in 10 different directions on the axis, okay? Whereas sheep will just stick together, and they'll follow you. And if you've got a decent sheepdog, it's even better, I grew up with border collies. They're great dogs. Okay. Anything else? Yep.
How do we remain hopeful in all of this? How do we keep hoping?
Christ is your hope. He's promised you eternal life. He's promised you joy in this life and in the next. If you have the Holy Spirit indwelling in you, you need fear nothing. the demon is a liar. His fundamental nature is to try and lie and intimidate. But the minute, you turn on him in faith, he runs. The Laorugians in the office of Compline. Resist him, do not give in to him, and he will flee from you. And as I said, that's how we stay hopeful. Christ is our hope. The longest surviving institution in the history of the human race? The papacy. The papacy is the longest surviving institution in the history of the human race. It has outlived the Kingdom of China, the Republic of Venice, every other civilization. Unbroken line from Leo XIV to Peter the Apostle. If that doesn't give you hope, I don't know what will. Great, good, okay. Thank you again.